everybody on the Square. Welcome to another episode of the Square Community Spotlight, where we get to know a member of the School of Motion community a little bit better. And this is a very special episode. It's our 6-month anniversary episode, and to celebrate, we have a very special guest. He is a man who has been prolific in the somewhat niche field of motion design, training, video, voiceover talent. And you may know him from compelling performances in assignments like Museum Milano, Circle Society, and who could ever possibly forget Scrapbook Elvis. But you may not know this, but there's much more to him than just being that voice that you hear whenever you open up the graph editor. He is the founder of School of Motion. He is the author of the Freelance Manifesto, father, metalhead, and passionate anti-olive activist. We have Joey Korenman.
That might have been the best intro anyone's ever done for me, Andrew. Thank you.
Was it too much? I mean, maybe it was a little too much. I don't know.
Well, no, I mean, the only thing I might change is I might put anti-olive activist first, because that, I love my children. I love being a father, but that is really pretty core to me, is my hatred of olives. Yeah.
You got to have your priorities,
Yeah.
So, well, first of all, thank you so much for making time. I know you're a busy guy.
Not really. No, it's fine.
Awesome. And just so for people who might be watching this expecting the usual, like, Joey Korenman professional development, business advice, podcast style interview, this really isn't your bag. The purpose of this is to kind of pull back the curtain a little bit, get to know Joey as a person a little bit more. It's going to be Q&A style with questions, some pretty good questions that we've got from the community on the Square. And so we're also going to kind of skip your backstory, Joey, just for the sake of time and the volume of questions. But for those interested in your origin story, is there a podcast or interview that you've done that you feel like kind of concisely or comprehensively gives them, who you are and your whole story?
It's a great question. I've done so many that it's hard to remember. I know that I was on the Futures podcast a few years back, and I'm pretty sure Chris and I went into that story.
Mm-hmm.
I've talked about it in the Freelance Manifesto. I talked, pretty in depth about the first half of my career being a working artist and running a studio. And then I've been on like several business podcasts, kind of talking about the business side of School of Motion. There's one called Mixergy that I was on several years ago that I kind of dove into that as well. I've been on the Smart Passive Income podcast, stuff like that. So if you Google Joey Korenman like podcasts, there's probably a dozen you can listen to.
So to start out, I took our questions from the community and I compiled them and categorized them. And the first question is kind of going to determine how some of the next questions go. So the first question for you from the community is, are questions about Joey being bald okay?
Yeah. Is it okay? It's my brand, guys. Like, I am heavily invested in the bald thing. So absolutely.
Okay, good. Well, I just wanted to make sure before we dive into these next few questions. So Brittany asks, what are your top hair tips?
Yeah, I mean, if you're asking me for hair tips, there is something wrong with your eyesight. I'll say this, for people who shave their head, right? You really got to get the hang of going against the grain. That's how you get, like, I just shaved in preparation for this, Andrew, out of respect for you. I just shaved probably a couple hours ago. And I get 5 o'clock shadow like instantly. So, it doesn't really help. But yeah, like at this point, I don't even need a mirror. I can just kind of feel as I'm going like this. Mm-hmm. I could frankly, I've never tried this, but I could probably shave my head dry if I had to. Okay.
Whoa.
So it's really all about practice. It's like anything else.
Pro tips here. So you kind of answered this a little bit, but can you give us some insight? How often do you shave your head?
It really depends. I feel like I've been lazy about it lately. Like the older I've gotten, here's the thing: when you shave your head, and I shave my head because if I don't, I'm like Larry David bald. Like I got like zero hair, and so I just sort of prefer the way it looks this way. And the older I've gotten, the less it bothers me to look bald, right? So now like it's still twice a week, but it might be really more like every 4 days or something like that. Like it's starting to stretch out a little bit. Usually when I have to be on camera or something, I do it just so I I look a little younger. You know, I'm 40 now, and I'm starting to get some gray, like in my beard hairs when I let them grow out. Yeah, I'd say like every 4 days, maybe 5 if I'm on vacation. Yeah.
The next question. Oh, so you haven't always been bald, and I found an archival photo here. I would love. I'm not really sure exactly what questions to ask about this. You're on the left, I believe. That's you on the left.
That's me on the left. And by the way, for the record, I'm balding in that photo. I'm not bald, but
can you just like what's going on here?
So listen, when I love this photo for so many reasons. It brings me back. This is probably 2002. 2003. I talk about it on the podcast. I'm a very serious musician. I'm not a professional musician, but I take it very seriously. And when I was living in New England, I was in several bands. This was the first like real band I was in. We were called Oma, and we were kind of like a Deftones, Tool, progressive hard rock band. And we needed, back in those days, you needed to put together a press kit. And this was even kind of before electronic press kits were big. So we needed like photos for our MySpace page, basically. And so the guy on the right, that's my bass player, Carl. Carl was actually in like a real band that like toured and was on Ozfest and stuff like that called Reveille, which was like a new metal, rap metal band. And so he knew a really good photographer who photographed all these like metal bands. So he was like, oh, we're going to go. You guys are a hard rock band. We're going to go out to the woods. And I think it was Nahant, Massachusetts, which is like, kind of this in the middle of nowhere place. And it was cold, and we took band photos in the woods, which is like such a cliche. The only thing worse than this is if there was a brick wall behind us. Like that would be the ultimate cliche. This is probably the best photo. There's a photo from this where I'm holding drumsticks, which is like the cringiest thing you could possibly do. But I don't know. I have such fond memories of this time. We played tons of shows and all that. And I'm still friends with all these guys. They're like my brothers.
Oh man, that's awesome. Yeah. I found that when I was researching this, I was like, whoa, wait, is that Joey?
That's me.
So transition, Jake Bartlett asks, just by the way, the pace is going to be quick because we got a lot of questions. Jake Bartlett asks, do you have any hobbies outside of running a motion design education empire?
Yeah. Empire might be a strong word, but okay. So music is like the number one sort of hobby. And, I've been playing drums since I was 12. So I've been playing most of my life. I take it very seriously. I've also been really focused on guitar lately and learning to like write and mix songs and stuff like that. I actually released a metal EP last year. That was kind of my COVID project. Yeah. I didn't really tell anybody because I'm not trying to like get fans or go tour or do anything. It was just kind of like this creative urge. I had to do it. And it was a good project to learn how to like arrange songs and record really well. And then I actually learned how to mix. I mixed it. So yeah, you can find it on YouTube. It's called, my band name was Stasi, Stasi. And then the EP's name, I like made fake album artwork and did the whole thing. It's called The New Normal. And that's my metal EP that I released. So music, running. For years, I was running like 2 marathons a year. And that kind of stopped a couple of years ago because I injured my ankle. I'm now signed up for a half marathon in like 2 months. I'm getting back into that. I recently got into like woodworking, like sort of the dad version of it. Like I can't do intricate things, but I'm actually, so like back here, let me see if I can show you. So like there's like some couches back here. Right.
You made those?
This is like, I made those. The table, I'm on a high top table, which is why it's wiggly. I made that. I built like a loft bed for my son. So I've kind of learned how to use, a table saw and stuff like that. So those are the big 3, I would say. And then just like, hanging out with my family, traveling.
Nice. You mentioned music, which brings us to the next category of questions. So, Alan, I think I'm pronouncing this right, Demophiles?
Yep.
He goes by Demophiles on
Demophiles, yes.
Yeah,
I know Alan, yeah.
So he asks, who is the current godfather or godmother of blast beats, and why is his name Spencer Pruitt of Archspire? And I actually had to Google. So for those who don't know, Archspire, according to Wikipedia, is a Canadian technical death metal band from Vancouver.
Yeah, this is a great question.
Yeah,
it's a really important question, actually. So here's the thing. So I want to kind of clarify something, because EJ teases me about this all the time, like my taste in music. And I think, when you hear aggressive music and you're not like really in that scene and familiar with the bands, you just lump everything into death metal. I actually don't like death metal, to be honest. And I know it's like, if you listen to Meshuggah, to you that might sound like death metal, but to me it's totally different. It's not even close, right? But if we're talking about death metal, we're talking about blast beats. By the way, if you're listening and you don't know what a blast beat is, because like most people probably don't, I'm trying to think of like a good song to kind of listen to. I mean, listen to any Archspire song. Just go on YouTube and find one. It's basically where your hands and feet are just going really fast the whole time. It's just this like machine gun. That's a blast beat. Okay, so the best blast beater, I think, right now, and I don't really follow that genre that closely. You've got the godfather of it's Derek Roddy. There's just no way around that. He's amazing at it. But I think the best, cleanest person doing it right now is a guy named Alex Rudinger. And he's kind of a YouTube drummer. There's this whole thing now of like YouTube and Instagram musicians who are not actually in bands, but get really, really popular. And then they end up finding their way into a band through these things. And so he's kind of done that. He's toured with a band called The Faceless, which is known for their blast beats. And he's a machine. He's incredible. So I would check out Alex Rudinger, Alan. I don't know if that was a serious question, but I answered it seriously.
There's a lot of these that I can't tell. It could go either way. I'm just going to treat them all like serious questions. Well, speaking of, I'm gonna switch to second screen here again. Speaking of Meshuggah, right?
Yes.
This is you actually met them. Can you give me some context to how did this happen?
What you're seeing here is like maybe just slightly underneath the birth of my children and my wedding day, like the best day of my life. So the story behind these photos is there's a music video director named Ian McFarlane, and he lived in New England. And I didn't know him at all, but he reached out to me because he was running a production studio there and he needed some After Effects done. And he got my name from somewhere, called me up, and whatever he wanted to hire me for, like the timing didn't work out. And then he was like, oh, by the way, I have this other thing, this project I'm doing, and I need someone to do graphics for it. It doesn't have any money, but I figured I'd ask you. And I'm like, what is it? And he's like, well, I'm going on tour with Meshuggah, and I'm producing a documentary about their tour. And I'm like, that is my favorite band on earth. I will do whatever you want for free. I will not take money. I'll do whatever you want. And I literally, for free, did all of the titles and the opening title sequence for the Alive DVD from Meshuggah. It's actually in IMDb. It says Joey Korenman graphics for it. And then they toured and they had these posters for the movie. And my name was like in the credits. Like they made it look like a movie thing with like the credits.
That's
at the very
awesome.
bottom. While my name was on it. Anyway, so just being associated with it, I'm like, this is so cool. All my bandmates were like, oh my God, this is great. So then Meshuggah comes to town. They're playing at the Palladium in Worcester, Massachusetts. And me and my buddy go. And when I get there, Ian's at the show and he calls me. He's like, hey, are you here? Yeah, meet me in the parking lot. And he gives me 2 backstage passes. And he's like, thank you for doing the graphics. So me and my friend Jay, who was the guitarist, he was in that photo that you showed earlier. He's also like a big Meshuggah fan. And we get to go and hang out with Meshuggah for an hour before they play. They had this bucket of beers. I'm talking to the drummer. I'm asking him about, and then we watch the show. During the show, we get to go up and watch from the side of the stage and listen through the in-ear monitors. Then we get to hang out with them and take these pictures. And basically, like you can hear in my voice, I was that night, like it would be almost impossible to top that for me in terms of meeting my heroes. And they were so cool. I mean, they're from Sweden. And they're just really kind of soft-spoken guys, but they look like Vikings. And when they play, they look terrifying. But actually, in real life, they're very sweet people.
It's interesting. I feel like that's sort of my impression of a lot of like the metal musicians that I can think of. When they're not like in character on the stage, they're like really nice, kind of like easygoing, soft-spoken people. It's almost
think about it. And actually, there's something kind of, I think it's interesting. It's an interesting dynamic to this kind of thing. And actually, it kind of in a way, it ties into the way my experience has been meeting, like, Ash Thorpe and people like that, right? To get good enough at your instrument to play what Meshuggah plays, you have to be a complete introvert recluse, like for years, and practice 8 hours a day over and over and over again. It doesn't lend itself, like that level of technicality doesn't lend itself to people who are out partying all the time. Now, of course, there are people that can somehow do both, like Motley Crue or something. But for the most part, to get that good, to be able to do sweep picking and all the crazy stuff, Archspire, good God. Like their guitarist, Dean Lamb, is one of the most ridiculous guitar players I've ever seen. And he has a YouTube channel, and he's got this nose ring, through his nose like that. And he's tattooed up, but he's Canadian, and he's a very soft-spoken guy, and he's very thoughtful. And it's like, because he's actually most of us were nerds. Like we like to be alone practicing something, and then you get good at it, and you realize, oh, now I need to have this persona. If you're a musician, you have to. If you're an artist, even if you're an artist, I mean, look at Beeple, right? Beeple's cultivated this persona, and it's pretty close to his actual personality. I've hung out with him before, but when he goes on Jimmy Kimmel or who did he on Fallon? He went on Jimmy Fallon, right? He's being a character, right? He's not being the guy that literally like every day like ignores his family for 3 hours to make something, right? So he can get good enough at it. So there's kind of an interesting thing there.
Yeah. So speaking of Canadians, that's the very thin thread of a transition here.
Nice.
One of the
nice
School of
segue.
Motion, Canadian School of Motion alumni asks, Bo Ryan asks, a wizard curses you to only hear one song for the rest of your life, but you can choose the song. What song would it be? So you have one song for the rest of your life, and a wizard's involved.
God. I mean, it's the only song that I have never gotten sick of is Africa. That's why it's like a meme, like at School of Motion. That's why, like, there, it's funny because like everybody at School of Motion, especially like on our team, knows that like that's kind of my song. But even before that, like when I was teaching at Ringling, I would sometimes show up and, our class was at like 8:30 in the morning or something, and the students are all hungover and tired. And I would just blast Africa and make them listen to it. Both the original and the metal version, done by Frog Stomp Studios, amazing. And then even before that, at Toil, I would do the same thing. Like at the studio, I would just crank it and make everyone suffer through it. So I guess like I was trying to think of a better answer because it's such a cliche at this point, but it's definitely Africa by Toto.
I'm gonna share with you a Chrome tab here with audio. I think you know what's coming. Grayscale.
Yeah.
Hey everybody, it's Nick again for Grayscale Gorilla. I am the gorilla, Grayscale Gorilla. Hey everybody, it's Nick again for Grayscale Gorilla.
This is you.
Yes.
I am the gorilla, Grayscale Gorilla. That's looking pretty good.
So, this is like you're extending your you did voiceover in motion design,
right.
Education material, and you're really extending your reach and your skill set into also like the accompaniment. Can you give us some context? Like, how did this come about? Like, what is going on here?
Yeah. So all this was, all right. So, I mentioned I'm trying to get better at guitar, right? Like I can play okay, but it's my second instrument. So I'm trying to get better at it. That's a 7-string guitar, by the way. That is like a metal guitar. And so I'm in actually an online guitar school. It's called Riff Hard. Oh. It's awesome. If anyone wants to get good at metal guitar, go sign up for Riff Hard. It's amazing. It's like School of Motion for metal guitar. And so what they were doing for a while was they would have these daily like riff kind of, not like a competition, but it was basically like a riff challenge. Record yourself playing a riff every day for a week. And there would be themes. So like record something that's like easy for you. Record something outside your ability. Record something original. Okay. So writing original stuff is still very difficult for me. So, and I had just seen, have you ever seen the guy, it's like his stuff goes viral where he's a guitar player and he'll take like a clip of one of those TV pastors ranting about something and he'll turn it into a metal song, right? I had just seen one about like this guy ranting about COVID-19 and it was so funny. And I thought, I want to try to make something like that. So I needed a sound bite to like write something to. And I was like, it'd be funny if I took, because Nick and I are friends and we kind of like, go back and forth on Twitter sometimes, just goofing around. And I thought it'd be funny if I took a Grayscale Gorilla tutorial and made a song out of it. And then I tagged him, and it kind of like, I don't know, it got like a pretty good response. Like people seem to dig it.
Yeah. Oh,
I dig
it.
Yeah. So, but like, okay, so to say something serious about it, I am a huge believer in the concept of like the talent stack, right? Like, okay, there's lots of people who are great at motion design and, way better than me. And great at making tutorials, way better than me. Ben Marriott is better than me, okay? And then people who can do voiceovers, and people who are musicians, and people who have this weird sense of humor. I'm the only one that has all of those things kind of like at a decent level, right? I'm not like world class at any of them, and those things make whatever content I put out uniquely me. And that's honestly like how School Motion got traction, was just by sort of not trying to, shave the rough corners off of things and to try and speak to everybody. It was by like leaning into the things that are weird about me and unique. And so that is a perfect example of like, there's probably not another person on earth who would want or think to do that. And I thought,
to agree with you there.
Right? It's just such a niche. It's like nicheception or something.
But for that reason, it was super enjoyable. Like when I found that, I was like, this is amazing. No one else on earth will make this.
Exactly. I did the exact same thing a few months later with Hava Nagila. I found a version of Hava Nagila, and I removed the instruments and I wrote a metal version of Hava Nagila. So I'm having fun doing stuff like that. And, it's actually, I don't know, it's kind of a good writing exercise too. So it's kind of working on my writing skills, and then it's also just fun.
So when you were taking, what was the name of the school? Riff Hard?
Riff Hard, yeah.
Were you just judging them the whole time on their education platform and content delivery? And I mean, that must have been kind of a unique experience from your perspective. What was that like?
Yeah, that's a good question. Now, so they have a completely different setup than us, right? They don't run these sort of cohort-based, multi-week classes, right? It's a subscription. Most of the interaction happens in their Facebook group, and then they have this library, this growing library of lessons. And what's really cool, and I've actually we've started stealing ideas from it because it's so good. They run contests. They have a lot of great things they do within the community. But as far as like their learning platform and stuff like that, they don't need what we have built, right? Like it's kind of a different thing. And so now I will say I've taken master classes and stuff before, right? And I'm always a little frustrated, or things that are on Teachable. Right? Teachable is a platform where anyone can put a class on there and sell it. And I feel like the way that those are set up, sometimes it's more, it's set up more to, I guess, optimize for marketing. I guess it would put it that way, right? Versus optimize for learning. And that's always kind of been like our North Star. It's like, okay, we have to market everything clearly, but we really separate the two. Like the front part of our website, when you go to schoolmotion.com and you see that, that's optimized for marketing. When you're in the class, it's not optimized for marketing at all, right? Like it's optimized for learning. And so I think that some of the platforms kind of miss the mark on that. And it's challenging too. I mean, I can tell you, it's very difficult to build a platform that works well enough to actually be effective.
I can only imagine. This is my first session as a TA, and I had no idea the tools behind the scenes with the spotlight videos and how you can bookmark and favorite. Were those tools part of Bright Cove? I might edit this out. I'm just curious.
Oh yeah, no, I'm happy to talk about all this. So I want to be super clear too. So the platform that you're seeing now, I'm responsible for the MVP version of it that existed years ago, right?
Yeah.
Now we have an engineering team, we have a director of product, we have a community manager, and we have a TA manager. So all of those features have been built up slowly over the years and implemented by our engineering team, a lot of it in response to TA feedback, right? So, and that's the challenging thing about doing this is you build what you think you need, and then you always have to iterate based on when people actually start using it. And that's cool to hear you say that, because I mean, honestly, I think that, you know, we have this ambition, hopefully in the next year or 2 years, something like that, to make our platform available to other schools to use, because we put so much energy into it and it works ridiculously well. Like, and I can tell you, because I know a lot of people that run online schools, and some of them are doing a lot, you know, they're running classes a lot like we are. And I know what the challenges are, and the way they're solving it is through like brute force. There's nothing else out there that works the way our platform does. But it's kind of like this secret. And until you're a TA or you work at School of Motion, you don't actually know how robust it is. And it's literally the only way we could operate at the scale that we do. I mean, we've had a session in the past with over 2,000 students in it in one quarter, right? And I think during that session, we may have had 70 teaching assistants.
Yeah.
And so to manage, you know, think about the amount of homework coming in, and it needs to be funneled correctly and all of those things. So that's why we built it. And it's really the only way School of Motion could exist at this point.
I'm going to use Ben Marriott as a transition. You mentioned him. So Ben Marriott actually submitted a question. He says, how early should kids be learning After Effects? And what is appropriate punishment for not labeling layers? That's a good question. Yeah.
Ben. Yeah. I don't think Ben has children yet. I could be wrong. I talked to him a while ago and I didn't think he did.
I don't think he does.
But this is like exactly the right mindset for a parent, is how to best punish your child. Yeah. I mean, it's funny. I'll tell you, my kids, I think probably most kids right now. So my kids' ages are 11, 9, and 7. My son just turned 7. They are all three of them obsessed with YouTube. Like, and they, you know, celebrity in a movie, they don't care, right? They care about this YouTuber and this YouTuber. And it's like in these weird niches that, you know, there's a niche of like videos where people have these machines that just grind things into dust, and they just throw random stuff in it, right? These just machines that just destroy things, like an industrial grinder, and they'll put like a phone in it or a balloon or whatever. And there's influencers like in that space, and there's, you know, all these things. So they're very interested in making videos, and all of them. And now it's like, it's ridiculously easy to make videos, right? My middle daughter is really into stop motion. And so I was trying to get her, hey, I have Dragon Frame. I have cameras and lights. We could set it up. She's like, no, I have an iPad app. And she just like sets her iPad up on the table and gets her dolls. And literally we'll sit there for hours making stop motion. And then, you know, my oldest is now, she has a project at school with some of her friends. They're doing a 60-second film. And one of the things they want to do is use a green screen. So I have one of those like unfoldable ones. So I'm going to let them use it. And I'm hoping I can teach them how to, you know, pull a key in After Effects. I feel like, you know, I might lose them at that point, trying to make them go through a School of Motion class or something.
I'm familiar that you have a green screen from the MoGraph games. Not on my outline, just curious, do you have any regrets submitting yourself in front of green screen footage to the MoGraph games?
No, never. I tend to not regret things. I try to, like, it's just kind of like a philosophy I have. It's like regretting things is looking like there's always a silver lining, even if you totally bone something, right? Like, you know, and honestly, to do things like, you know, become a successful motion designer or a successful freelancer or start a business and grow it, you are going to eat. I don't know if we curse on
oh
these.
yeah.
You're gonna eat some shit. Like, it's gonna happen. You're gonna fall on your face and embarrass yourself horribly more than once. And you could say, oh, I regret doing that. And in the moment you do, but honestly, you learn so much that it's like, well, I wouldn't take it back either. So I guess I don't regret it. Right. So do I regret submitting myself to the MoGraph Olympics? Not a chance. And my daughter was in there too. And I was more nervous about that just because there's like weirdos out there and I didn't know what they do with her. But everyone she was so thrilled to see what people did. So
we're going to transition to the actual advice section, because there were some people, when you say ask Joey Korenman a question, they ask for advice. So this is going to be kind of rapid fire. So Logan Pinney, TA extraordinaire, says, how do you maintain such a positive, enthusiastic attitude all the time? That twinkle in your eye never goes away. And I've heard this from other people, that you just seem like always pretty chill. You don't really get flustered or upset.
Okay, well, that's not true. I mean, that's the weird thing about having like a public facing persona is that, you always, and I try to be super honest when I do things like this. So I try not to hide anything, but generally if I'm out in public anywhere, even if I'm just walking around like, my neighborhood, I don't know. I'm just happy, right? Like, why wouldn't I be? Now, of course, if something's going on, like for example, last night, my oldest daughter, Layla, she's 11. She's had like stomach issues since she was a kid, and it's like autoimmune stuff. She can't eat gluten, and if she does, it gives her a stomach ache. And if that happens too many times, it creates this sort of like inflammation, and then she's just in agony. Mm-hmm. So last night, my wife had to take her to the ER. Right?
Oh man.
So in that moment, I'm not happy-go-lucky. I do not have a smile on my face. I'm stressed out. I'm not like yelling and breaking things, but so like just like everybody else, like I can have a bad day. She was fine, by the way, if everyone's curious. Good. Totally fine. Yeah. But I guess like I don't know. It's funny because I think some of it is just the way I'm built. I don't really know why I'm this way and why other people aren't. Yeah. I find that it's maybe some of it is just kind of practical. Like I don't find it to be useful to be a pessimist, Mm-hmm. Like some people have this habit of just like, it's almost like a verbal tick where there's a lull in the conversation. So complain about something. And that is just like the opposite of me. I feel like that spreads this negative vibe. I don't like it. It's uncomfortable. I'd rather just be a goofball, say something silly, talk about something I like. So I guess part of it is how I'm built. Part of it's like a personal choice. If you find yourself, I would just say like, if you find yourself doing the complaining thing a lot, try, and I think actually I might've gotten this from Tim Ferriss, try the 30-day no complaints challenge. Right. And I think what he did was he put a rubber band on his wrist, and every time he found himself complaining about something, he'd pop his wrist. And after 30 days, you just stop complaining. And you'll find like your mood will change and your outlook will change just by not letting that negative stuff in.
Bree asks, and this could be a really in-depth question, but let's try to keep it sort of surface level just for the sake of time. Do you have any advice for people entering or re-entering the industry but have zero contacts? The motion design industry.
Yeah, so it's going to be impossible to get work without contacts. So what I would say is, first of all, handle the basics, right? Have a website, use best practices with that website. I think at this point, you kind of just have to have an Instagram account. And you don't need Twitter and Facebook. I think Twitter can help. But you need a website, you need an Instagram account, get a professional sounding email address, and then start reaching out to people, right? And if you don't know how to do that or how to find people, there's stuff on our site. There's Motion Hatch. There's the Freelance Manifesto if you really want to go deep. And that's kind of it. And if you want to kind of jumpstart some of that, go to Camp MoGraph, go to NAB, hang out with other motion designers for a few days, and it will come up naturally. Hey, what do you do? Are you freelance? Oh, I'm actually trying to, kind of kickstart my career. Oh, awesome. Send me your reel and I'll pass it around. Like it's kind of that easy. You just have to do it. It's just like, I just told you what to do. So if you just do that and your work's good enough, you'll be fine.
I would also add, just from personal experience, that if you take a School of Motion course and you actually engage the community, you're going to be all set. I mean, it's just right a big old place full of motion designers.
It's true, yeah.
So, Bo, Ryan, a couple people kind of asked a similar question, so we will combine them. In the Freelance Manifesto, you advise people to try and imagine their ideal day. What is your ideal day, and what does a typical day in your life look like? So sort of, what's a day with Joey look like?
Sure. So what's funny is the first time I did that exercise, I designed my ideal day, and I was like, I want to wake up in a warm place. I want to like bike to work. I want to have, I'm like obsessed with hot tubs. So I was like, I want to have a hot tub. I want to be able to travel, and I even made like a vision board, which is like a super cheesy entrepreneur thing where you put pictures of right. And that is literally my life now. Like every single thing that I said I wanted, I have. And the reason is because I chose it and I like made very concrete decisions to move towards that and not away from that. That's the whole point. That's the whole point of the perfect day exercise, is just to really be honest with yourself. What do you want? Which is the hardest question on earth to answer, by the way. What do you want? If you can answer that, it's instantly clear that the path you're on either goes towards that or away from that. Those are the only two answers, right? So right now, it's kind of like, okay, well, I achieved that, and I'm an ambitious person, so it's never enough, right? Which is kind of another issue to figure out. So I'm kind of evaluating, well, what's the next level of this? Like, that worked. So what's the next thing? And I don't have the answer yet, but I'll tell you what my day typically looks like when I have a good day is I wake up early. I try to get up by 5 or 6 at the latest. I work out almost every day. I've been doing 2 days a week of like pretty hardcore like weightlifting and then running again. So probably like 25, 30 miles a week. Wow. And then I usually kind of start working, and I work from home. I had an office for a while, but once COVID hit, we all were working from home and I got used to it. So now I work from home, and I'll kind of, I live and die by Todoist and my calendar, and I kind of get my stuff done. And then at the end of the day, it's a perfect day if I can grill, have a glass of wine with my wife, chill. And I try to be like in bed, maybe reading something by like 10, I don't like to stay up late. So that's my ideal day, is doing something like that.
What do you like to grill?
Everything. I actually just bought, I think you can see it.
Oh yeah, a little mini guy right there.
Yeah, so that's actually huge. It's called a big green egg. Here, I'll point it a little closer at it. Right?
Oh. So I see
the whole thing. No. The thing that's on the counter over there, that's my. It's a long story. My parents keep kosher, and so when they come to visit, we have separate like dishes and grills and stuff for them. Mm-hmm. But that big green egg over there, that's my new toy. That was my like Hanukkah present. I love grilling. Love grilling steak. Chicken, pork, everything. What I've really gotten into, especially with that, is like longer cooking, like indirect cooking. And we did a turkey breast the other day, like this huge bone-in thing, and smoking it and all that. So yeah,
do you have any secret?
I'd say that's another passion. Yeah.
What's a secret Joey Korenman recipe? Do you do like a rub, or are you more like a marinade kind of guy? Can you give us
definitely the rub? Yeah, basically everything I rub olive oil on, and then I'd say the one tip, because I think I can grill pretty well. Like people tell me that, and I don't know for sure, but that's what I'm told. So the two things that I always tell people are, one, buy a meat thermometer. Don't try to like touch it and guess. Like, you're not a professional chef. Get the freaking thermometer and know what the temperature is. Okay. And then two, you almost, when you're grilling, especially if you're smoking something, you cannot over season it. You cover the thing in seasoning. Yeah.
Awesome. This is exactly why I wanted to have this call, to get these sorts of nuggets that you can't get on the future. Like Christo isn't asking these questions.
I wouldn't tell Chris this if he asked me.
I probably wouldn't tell Chris to watch this either.
Yeah, I love Chris.
In the business work category, how many emails, direct messages, etc., people trying to contact you do you get a day-ish?
Okay, so on the email side, I mean, it's a lot, but a lot of the inbound stuff I get is like, so here's the problem. If you're on LinkedIn, which everyone should be, by the way, and I should have said that too, when you put your portfolio up in your Instagram, set up your LinkedIn. When you're on LinkedIn and your title says founder or CEO or anything like that, you just get bombarded, right? And I've never tried to hide my email addresses. I'm very public about it. So I get a ton of inbound requests for all kinds of stuff. And it started to become a problem, I don't know, a few years ago, like as we started to get bigger and people heard of us. These inbound requests, they come in and it can be a problem because I'm a people pleaser and they sound great. These sound like cool opportunities. Come on our podcast or do this. And it's like, I only have so much time. And I need to be doing like what's the most high leverage thing for School of Motion. So I actually have a poster now in my house that says, if it's not a hell yes, it's a no. And I look at it every day and I got that's I forget who said that. Derek Sivers, I think. He's the founder of CD Baby. He said that. Anyway, On Slack, it's a different story. And the reason for that is because I mean, I get plenty of messages and I'm tagged and stuff in our internal Slack, but I've been very, very deliberate, especially over the last 2 years, to start removing myself from as many processes as I can at School of Motion. The goal from day one was always to build something that was not the Joey Korenman show. And I don't know that I've been totally successful at that, but you know, there's, I think 30 people full time at School of Motion. And so, you know, I want everybody else to be able to like run with the ball and shine and all of that. Right. And so over the years, I've sort of layered people underneath me in the organization so that I don't get bombarded all day, because we have like an amazing director of marketing. We have, you know, an amazing president, you know, and so it's actually not that crazy, but it was so much work and very difficult to sort of get there, especially coming from where School of Motion started, which was just me making tutorials with my face on them, right? So it's tricky, but I mean, you know, and the example I use sometimes, and I love Andrew too, so I have massive respect for him, but he built his business differently. And the same with Chris Do, right? His business is built around Chris Do. And so if Chris left, the future's gone. That's it, right? And I don't want School of Motion to be built that way. I want it to be built where it can go on for 500 years, if that's a thing, right? And so that's that's another thing. It's intentional. And it also saves me from being like slacked to death. Yeah.
That's a good term, slacked to death.
Yeah.
This sort of touches on a couple questions. So Jake Bartlett asks, if you could go back to just before starting 30 days of After Effects, would you do anything differently?
This is interesting because it's like a callback to that regret question. Do I regret anything I did, or would I do it differently? Honestly, I don't think I would. I mean, you know, before 30 days of After Effects, and only the most OG School of Motion fans would know this, you know, I had probably made, I don't know, 10, 15 tutorials before that, and launched a Cinema 4D plugin that we sold for a year and a half, version 1 and version 2 of that plugin. And we even had beta testers and stuff. You know, that I learned by doing that, that's really hard to do. And I don't like doing it. I don't like making, you know, plugins and software and trying to sell it and support it. It's just not my thing. It doesn't bring me joy the way teaching does. So I guess I could have skipped that step and just started teaching, but I wouldn't have known that, right? I had to try and not, you know, and it made some money, but it was like nothing really. Like it wasn't worth the amount of time it took. But the only way to learn that for me was to do it and to try and stumble. And you could say it failed. We don't sell that plugin anymore. Most people have never heard of it. So I don't know that there is something different that I would have done. You know, that the 30 days of After Effects is the one thing I'd say that worked exactly the way it was supposed to. I was very intentional, and it worked perfectly the way I hoped it would. And it might have been timing, just luck. You know, it thrashed me to get them done, but it was worth it. Yeah.
Well, this ties into the next question, which is, how has your role in School of Motion evolved since the beginning? To like, you started making tutorials, sounds like just you know, making these tutorials, and now you're, I'm not exactly, to be honest with you, I'm not exactly sure what you do now at School of Motion. I mean, I know you're the head guy, but could you talk to us about how that evolution has happened and what you do now?
Yeah, sure. It's so different now. It's like very different. So, I mean, at the beginning, when I started School of Motion, I was still at Toil. So I was still every single day working on projects, right? I was in the software. And it's funny because, you know, I'm known, I think, mostly for teaching After Effects because that's where we started. I used Cinema 4D every single day. I was using V-Ray and RealFlow and doing like photorealistic stuff. I mean, like I really was like in the weeds of the motion design world. And so I think I brought that, you know, kind of sensibility and that lens to all of the early stuff we did. And Animation Bootcamp, which was the first class that we made, was built out of my experience at Toil, where we would hire artists and freelancers, and they'd come in knowing After Effects really well, but they couldn't animate a ball bounce. They had no idea how to animate, right? Now it's different because I have not done client work in, I can't even remember. I mean, probably the last reel I put together was 2014, right?
I
So
think
my
you
last
showed that
reel
on the
is-
Square, maybe. Did you?
I probably have. I've posted
Or-
it a few times, like in the Square and
Yeah.
and other places, but you know, and I think it holds up okay. I think it's like
Yeah.
it's decent. It's very long. It's way too long. And I probably stopped doing client work in 2015, so it's been a while. So now my connection to the industry is very different, right? I'm not actually doing client work, and so I have this weird perch where, like, you know, I just recorded a podcast with Jay Grandin, who is one of the founders and runs Giant Ant. And it's like, I get to talk to people like that. I get to talk to, you know, I interviewed Ryan Honey of Buck, and I get to talk to people that most motion designers don't. So I kind of get this like very high level view of what's going on, but I'm not in the weeds anymore. Right. And it makes it in a lot of ways harder for me to know what is actually happening that's important that we need to be teaching stuff. And that's why I'm so glad we have, you know, Kyle and Sarah and Frank and Ryan and EJ and other people, Ryan Plummer. There's a lot of people on the team that are still like very much like kind of in the weeds, and some of them freelance on the side, so they're still doing client work. And so now I have to rely on them for, you know, what actually is important. What should we teach next? Because honestly, you know, I am never going to learn Blender. Like, I've just accepted that, right? It's not going to happen. Do we need to be teaching it though? So I've had to really shift my focus from like the motion design part of my brain being the most active. And now it's honestly, it's like the business side and learning. And when I say business, I don't mean like looking at spreadsheets, and I just mean like, how do we structure this business so that it can be successful and keep growing? And there's a lot of opportunities out there for us to teach other things. And that's the kind of stuff, honestly, like that's the most interesting to me. And I've heard Nick Campbell say similar things where, you know, going into Cinema 4D and making stuff, he still loves doing that. But figuring out how to make Grayscale Gorilla work better for its customers, that's more interesting to him at this point. Because it's just a different type of creative challenge, right? It's very similar, yeah.
I think Grayscale Gorilla music videos, from what I've seen, that little sampler, there might be something there. And so David Arbor asks, do you get to animate or spend time on the box much these days, and how do you feel about that? It kind of goes right with what you were saying.
Yeah, it's very rare, to be honest. You know, I'm still making, so I love making tutorials. It's just like fun, and I love doing it. So I'm still doing that, not nearly as often as I used to.
You just did the Photoshop. Oh, sorry to cut you off. You did the Photoshop.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So I did that Photoshop, how to cut stuff out in Photoshop. And again, like that kind of stuff, it's like, some of it's very tactical now, because when I started making tutorials, I didn't understand marketing and SEO and all that, right? And now we do, and we have Holly, who's really like an expert at that. And so we make stuff now that like helps us make inroads into other areas that we're kind of going towards. So we've been doing a lot of Photoshop content lately. We're actually doing a live stream at the end of this month with Adobe that I don't think we've announced it publicly yet, but so you heard it here first, but we'll be doing that, I think, on the 24th. And it's, you know, sort of geared at like people who are social media designers who now want to learn to animate, right? So it's a little more tactical the way we're doing stuff like that. But in terms of, am I animating stuff in After Effects? Every once in a while I'll do it, or, you know, like, I don't know, I'll look at like animation bootcamp stuff and sometimes do little critique, but it's like, the truth is I've gotten rusty. I mean, like when I get into After Effects, I'm not nearly as fast as I used to be. I used to be so fast in it, like keyboard shortcuts and everything. And I barely touch the mouse. And now I find like, okay, I have to remember how you do this. And it's especially true with stuff like expressions, where, you know, you don't use the 2-comp expression for a month and you forget like where the bracket goes and all that kind of stuff. So it's how does it make me feel? It's a little bittersweet, to be honest, because it's like, that's what kind of got School of Motion started. That was the first half of my career, like a decade plus was just doing that. And I really love it. But now, I don't know, I've gotten older, and like I've got this much more difficult problem in front of me of like School of Motion, this company and this brand and all that, which is also just as exciting and interesting to me as the After Effects stuff was 10 years ago. So I really love it. It probably would be fun to do more on the box, but I don't know. Sometimes you have to kind of, there's this great book, it's called Transitions. And the whole point of it is that if you want to like get somewhere from where you are, there's this thing you can't avoid, which is leaving the comfort, wandering. And I think in the book, they call it wandering through the forest of like uncertainty. And then on the other side, you find the next thing. There's no way to be comfortable and jump to the next thing. You have to be comfortable, then be uncomfortable, then do the next thing. That's the only way it works. And so I sort of went through that journey over the last several years with School Motion. And so here I am, not using After Effects as much, unfortunately. But there's plenty of other things keep me busy.
Yeah. Because time is running short, I just want to apologize to everybody who asked questions and I didn't get to them. But I'm going to end with this question. Then maybe if you have any parting advice, that would be awesome, and we can wrap this up. So the last question is, how long does it take to make a School of Motion course, and can you describe the general process briefly? However in-depth or brief you want to go into that. Curious to know, how is a course made?
Yeah. And by the way, Andrew, like I don't have anything after this, so if you want to go a little long, I'm happy to also. So how long does the course take? It depends a lot. So, and they started taking longer and longer as we upped the production value, right? So Animation Bootcamp, I recorded it all myself. I had, I think Amy at the time helping me, maybe. I think I basically did all of that myself, just producing it, recording podcasts, editing them, everything. And that took about 3 months, I think.
Wow,
and then we had, quick. Yeah. But I mean, it was my full-time job. That's all I did every day. I also had a piano hanging over my head, which was, I had already sold the class to people. And I started it. I got about, I don't know, a third of the way done, and then it started. So I had to finish it, right? But now you take a class like Lights, Camera, Render is a recent one. Illustration for Motion, I think from start to finish, that probably took 7 or 8 months. And that includes pre-production. Like, we do a ridiculous, thorough outlining phase. It takes weeks. We want to know exactly what's in that class and play with the order and all of that and just get that right. Then we, I'm talking to School of Motion alumni, so it's like, that all of our assignments have artwork associated with it. And depending on the class, it might be something from Sarah Beth, who made boards for you, right? Or from Ariel Costa, who made boards for you. We have to figure out, like, okay, what is that? We need to write a script sometimes and have art direction, and then hire a designer and get the assets, and all times 10 or 12 lessons. So it's very complicated, and booking podcast guests and dealing with that, and right. So it's insanely complicated to make a School of Motion class, which is why we only have 15 of them. That's also one of the reasons why we acquired Holdframe last year, I think it was 2 years. It was in 2020, like right at the end. Because we wanted to have an outlet for these shorter form things where we, like a Holdframe workshop, we can make one from start to finish in 2 weeks, right? It's a totally different process. And they're still amazing, and you can learn a lot from them. It's different than a class. So yeah, that's the rough outline of how it works. Yeah.
Do you bring instructors to like a studio to record, or do you just like have them record in their homes?
So it's kind of shifted over the years. What we used to do, so everybody records the lessons in their house, right? We we have these gear kits that we send them with, like a Mac Pro and the microphone we want them to use, and a camera kit with lights and everything, right? Oh, wow. And our production team helps them set that up virtually. With the Holdframe stuff, it's gotten even really more sophisticated, where we can actually see what is on their screen and what their camera's seeing, like over a Google Meet. So like a producer can be monitoring it as it's being recorded and stuff. We've gotten pretty good at it. Like when you see people on camera, like in the intros to lessons and stuff like that, generally we do that at the end of the production cycle, and we do like one big shoot to get all of that stuff and edit it in. And so for that, we used to have people just come to Florida, and because I had all the gear and it was cheaper to just fly one person to Florida for a few days, come to my office, I'll shoot it with you. I have a teleprompter and all that stuff. And then I send it off to the editors. But now, or lately, we've actually been, because we have like a pretty big team now, and we have editors that can shoot kind of spaced out across the country. So sometimes we'll send an editor to that person's house with like a creative director, and they'll just do the shoot at the person's house. And that's what we did for Sarah Beth for Illustration for Motion. We went to her house in Portland, her and Tyler's house, and we set up a shoot, and we did it all in one afternoon. We did the same thing with Mark Christensen in his apartment in San Francisco. David, I'm pretty sure, did it in his house. So it's kind of shifted over the years to, it's all about like what's easiest on the instructor. I want it to be like comfortable for them because it's painful enough to make a class, as anyone who's ever tried knows,
Specifically to talking about AMM, because I know Sander was recording, at least he has video of him all over the world, essentially. How did that work?
Yeah. So to be honest, Sander did that himself. So Sander is one of the most interesting, smart, brilliant people I've ever met in my life. And so when he started making the class with us, he went through the process with us of like outlining and everything. And that class in particular had a ton of artwork requirements, which made it more complicated. And then, so we were like, cool, we've got this package like ready to go and you can start recording. But he just kept wanting to take it to the next level. And so he like had a buddy that had a drone, do drone footage. And then I think he was, he might've been freelancing for Gunner, or he was in Detroit for some reason. So he stopped by Gunner and did some stuff there. He was in Vancouver. And so he did the thing with Jorge. And he just like has an idea. And he's also a really great like photographer and cinematographer. So he can shoot his own stuff and it looks beautiful. And it was his class and we wanted it to feel like him. So we were like, cool, go ahead, go do it. So a lot of that was literally like a surprise from him. And he would sometimes surprise us, hey, look what I did. And I'm like, what the hell? It's amazing. So it just adds to the class and makes it even cooler.
Awesome. Well, yeah. To be respectful of your time, I know you said you could go a little over. I think we already have just a little bit, but I'm going to wrap this up. I usually like to end these with just kind of opening up the floor to the guest. Do you have any advice or anything you'd like to say to the School of Motion alumni community?
Yes. So first of all, thank you for being here and for having taken a class. And I really hope that you've gotten like a ton of value, not just from the class, but from the community and the other pieces of School of Motion, because we're kind of this big sprawling thing now. And the North Star is always like, how do we make the students and alumni, how do we make their lives better? And not just career, but life, right? And so I guess my advice would be what's going on right now in the industry is that there isn't really like an industry the way there used to be, right? Like when you used to say motion design, you'd think of motionographer and Buck and PSYOP and these studios, right? And they're still out there doing amazing work. But the world of motion is so much bigger now. It's enormous. We're learning that at School of Motion, just finding out that like there are enormous groups of people trying to learn After Effects, figure out how to animate things well. They do not consider themselves motion designers. They would never label themselves that way. And so we're starting to sort of even shift the way that we talk about things because honestly, what we want to teach people is design and animation, right? And if you broaden your thinking in that way, then you'll find opportunities for clients and gigs and work and stuff that you may not think of otherwise. I know a lot of artists are working almost exclusively on stuff that they're outputting to Lottie files now, right? Where they're not even rendering a video file. They're like, spitting out a JSON file and giving it to somebody. And then it goes on a website or it goes in an app. And a lot of the people working on that stuff, interaction designers and things like that, they probably don't think of themselves as motion designers, right? You, as a School of Motion alumni, you're probably still a little bit early in that world where maybe you do label yourself motion designer, right? You identify that way. But try to imagine yourself as a designer and an animator, because you should have both of those skills. And then in that world, the world of employment opportunities and clients you could have and projects you could work on is almost infinite. It really is. And, one of the things that I talked about with Jay in this podcast, which it'll probably come out in like a few weeks or a month or something. And it was great, was like, there is this talent shortage, and it's not necessarily that there's an artist shortage. It's that it's the same thing I saw a decade ago in Boston. Like there's plenty of people that know After Effects, there's not that many that know After Effects and have a good eye and can composite well and can tell when it doesn't look right or can animate something that feels good, right? One of the 30 days of After Effects, forget what day, it was based on a tip I got from a guy named Kyle Predke who used to work for me.
Oh, yeah.
And he came in, he was really young at the time too, and he was the best animator I'd ever worked with in my life. It didn't matter what the hell he touched. It just looked awesome. And I learned a lot from just watching him and seeing how he works. And he was so rare. That's why we instantly hired him. We're like, dude, you're the best animator in Boston, frankly. Right. And there was a lot of people doing After Effects in Boston, but it wasn't like you have to really kick their ass to get like good animation out of them. Right. So anyway, I guess like the point I'm trying to make is the world of motion design is not motion design anymore. It's design, animation, it's UI, it's UX. Lots and lots of video editors, almost every video editor now needs to know After Effects, right? And you, as someone that knows After Effects, maybe you also like video editing. So maybe lean into that a little bit because that's an enormous world of work. Or maybe you really are interested I'm trying to think, there's one of our TAs has actually been doing YouTube videos. I think it might be Ivan Wittenborg has been doing these videos on YouTube, tutorials about using After Effects and kicking out code into Lottie, and then actually being able to like adjust that code like in real time on the site based on behavior and stuff like that. And that's an enormous market that I think people, especially people who got into the industry when I did, it's less visible than like, oh, but I want to go work at a studio. I want to get a good job. And so I can make really cool stuff. Yeah, but the world of cool stuff is so big now. So I guess that'd be my advice, like broaden your horizons in terms of like the type of work that's out there. And the type of skills that's going to require. We are making an effort right now to create more courses that are more accessible, to your point, Andrew, where, because some of the stuff, like to learn After Effects, I think you kind of need like a big, deep dive to get it, right? That's the best way to learn it. But then to learn how to use Lottie, you don't need a 12-week course, right? Or, I don't know, to learn a very specific Cinema 4D thing. There's a really cool app called Spline. EJ's messing around with now, and I think a tutorial is coming out soon. That's a real-time 3D tool for the web, right? You don't need an 8-week Spline class. If you've taken Cinema 4D Basecamp, you have all the fundamentals. You need something short to the point that can teach you this thing that is going to be an in-demand skill, I promise you. Like websites are going to have 3D on them in the next probably 2 to 3 years. So I would try to like every once in a while look up from the keyboard and kind of like put your head on a swivel, look at what's going on, not just in the industry, but like in the world, because it's kind of scary how big this field has gotten if you include all designers, all animators.
Wise words. And on behalf of the School of Motion alumni community, just want to say thank you so much for starting School of Motion. I'm sure you hear it all the time, but I just want to take this opportunity to extend some gratitude. Everybody who's part of the Square and has taken School of Motion courses has benefited from what you've created. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for doing this, Andrew. And it's always awesome to hear that. And it's still surreal to me to hear stuff like that and to know that, this little idea I had on a train, 9 years ago has turned into what it's turned into. And I really, really can't say thank you enough to everyone who's, had the faith in School of Motion to take a class or to engage with our content or listen to the podcast. It really means a lot, even if you, and I know everyone here has taken a class, but even people who never take a class, I still feel very fortunate that they're getting value from what we're putting out.
It's very value first. Well, that about wraps it up for me. Joey, thank you so much again for taking time to be here.
Yeah, anytime, Andrew. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to hit stop recording.